Nicknames of Soviet war machines. What the Germans called USSR's weapons during World War II. World War II wasn't just about battles, heroes, and strategies. It was also about the machines that defined the era. The Soviet Union's tanks, planes, and artillery were so formidable that German soldiers couldn't help but give them nicknames. These weren't just random labels. They were born from fear, respect, or sometimes a desperate attempt to laugh in the face of danger. Why nicknames matter in war. When you think of World War II, you might picture tanks rolling across fields, planes screaming overhead, or soldiers in the trenches. But there's another layer to the story. The nicknames soldiers gave to their enemies' weapons. These names weren't just for fun. They were a way to cope with the chaos of war. Imagine you're a German soldier, freezing in a foxhole, when a Soviet Il-2 Sturmovik roars above, shrugging off your anti-aircraft fire like it's nothing. You call it Iron Gustav or Cement Bomber because it feels invincible. Or picture swarms of tiny T-60 tanks, nicknamed indestructible locusts, overwhelming your lines. These names help soldiers make sense of the terror and power they faced. Nicknames reveal the psychology of war. The Germans, known for their precision and discipline, used these labels to humanize the Soviet juggernaut, to make it less frightening, or to grudgingly acknowledge its strength. In this article, we'll explore the most iconic Soviet weapons, the nicknames they earned, and the stories behind them. Plus, I'll throw my own thoughts, some economic insights, and real-time data from the web to show how the Soviets built a war machine that left the world in awe. Ready? Let's dive into the skies first. Soviet air power, the planes that ruled the skies. Il-2 Sturmovik, Black Death, Iron Gustav, and Cement Bomber. Let's kick things off with the Il-2 Sturmovik, a Soviet ground attack plane that was a total game changer. Designed by the brilliant Sergei Ilyushin, this beast was nicknamed Black Death or Plague by Soviet troops, and for good reason. Armed with 23mm cannons, bombs, and heavy armor, the Il-2 could shred tanks, bunkers, and entire enemy formations. But what did the Germans think of this flying fortress? They called it Iron Gustav because it was nearly indestructible. The Il-2's armor plating could take a beating. German anti-aircraft gunners swore their shells just bounced off it. Picture the frustration. You're firing everything you've got, and this plane just keeps coming, raining destruction. That's why they also dubbed it Cement Bomber, or Betonflugzeug in German, a nod to its concrete-like toughness. Another nickname, Butcher, captured its sheer killing power. With its cannons and bombs, the Il-2 could wipe out entire columns of troops and armor in minutes, leaving battlefields in ruins. My take: the Il-2 wasn't just a plane, it was a symbol of Soviet grit. In a war where every resource counted, the Soviets built a machine that was tough, reliable, and terrifyingly effective. The Germans' nicknames show they were both awestruck and terrified. Iron Gustav sounds like a comic book villain, but it was real, and it haunted their nightmares. This plane didn't just fight battles, it broke the enemy's spirit. Economic context. The Soviet Union churned out over 36,000 Il-2s between 1941 and 1945, making it the most produced military aircraft of the war. How'd they do it? Despite losing huge chunks of territory early in the war, the Soviets relocated entire factories to the Ural Mountains and Siberia. For example, factory number 18 in Kuibyshev, now Samara, was pumping out up to 15 Il-2s a day at its peak. The Soviet economy was a war machine itself. Women, teenagers, and even elderly workers filled factory shifts, working around the clock. According to historical data, by 1943, the USSR outproduced Germany in aircraft, despite starting the war at a disadvantage. This was a testament to centralized planning and sheer determination. I-16 fighter, Donkey, Rat, and Steel Viper. Next up is the I-16, a nimble little fighter plane that Soviet pilots affectionately called the Donkey Ishak. It wasn't the fastest or most advanced compared to German Messerschmitts, but in the hands of a skilled pilot, it was a force to be reckoned with. Its agility made it a tough target, darting through the skies like a pesky insect. The Germans nicknamed it Rada, a name that came from the Spanish Civil War, where the I-16 fought for the Republicans against Franco's forces. The name wasn't an insult. It reflected the plane's speed and elusiveness, like a rat scurrying out of reach. Another nickname, Steel Viper, highlighted its toughness and ability to strike fast and hard. Even when damaged, the I-16 could keep fighting, making it a frustrating foe. My take, the I-16 is proof that you don't need the flashiest tech to make an impact. Soviet pilots like Alexander Pokrushkin, a future ace, pulled off miracles with this plane, outmaneuvering more advanced German fighters. The Germans' nicknames show they respected its scrappy, unpredictable nature. Calling it a rat wasn't just about size, it was about how hard it was to pin down. Economic context. The I-16 was a pre-war design, with production starting in the mid-1930s. By 1941, the Soviets had thousands of them, built at factories in Moscow and Gorky, now Nizhny Novgorod. Each plane cost about 100,000 rubles, roughly $20,000 in 1940s dollars, making it cheaper than many Western fighters. This affordability let the Soviets flood the skies with I-16s, overwhelming the Germans with numbers. While Germany focused on quality over quantity, the Soviets' mass production strategy gave them an edge in the early war years. Soviet armor, tanks that shook the battlefield. BT-7, Mickey Mouse. The BT-7 was a light tank known for its blazing speed, up to 45 miles per hour on roads. It was a key player in the Soviet arsenal early in the war, designed for rapid breakthroughs. The Germans gave it a quirky nickname, Mickey Mouse. Why? When its turret hatches were open, they looked like the big ears of Disney's famous mouse. It sounds funny, but don't be fooled. This tank was no cartoon. The BT-7's speed and agility let it dart through enemy lines, causing chaos. It was a precursor to the legendary T-34, and its design influenced Soviet tank tactics. The Mickey Mouse nickname might seem like a jab, but it hid a grudging respect for a tank that could outrun and outmaneuver heavier German armor. My take, I love the irony of the Mickey Mouse nickname. The Germans tried to poke fun at the BT-7, but they couldn't ignore its effectiveness. This tank was like the scrappy underdog that keeps coming back, no matter how many times you knock it down. It set the stage for the T-34, which would later dominate the battlefield. Economic context. The BT-7 was built at the Kharkov Locomotive Factory, with around 5,000 produced from 1935 to 1940. Its design borrowed from the American Christie tank, using automotive parts to keep costs low. Each tank cost about 110,000 rubles, around $22,000 in 1940s dollars. This made it affordable enough to produce in large numbers, giving the Soviets a mobile striking force when the war broke out. ISU-152, Beast Slayer, and Can Opener. The ISU-152 self-propelled gun was a monster. Soviet soldiers called it the Beast Slayer, Zveroboy, because its 152mm gun could take out Germany's heaviest tanks, like the Tiger and Panther, with a single shot. The Germans had their own name for it, Can Opener, Dosnofner. That nickname says it all. One hit from the ISU-152 could rip through German armor like a knife through a tin can. My take, the ISU-152 is the ultimate example of brute force done right. It wasn't fast or fancy, but it didn't need to be. One shot could turn a Tiger into scrap metal. The Can Opener nickname is both hilarious and terrifying. It's like the Germans were admitting, yeah, this thing just tears us apart. It's a testament to Soviet engineering, simple, rugged, and devastating. Economic context. The ISU-152 was built at the Chelyabinsk tractor plant, nicknamed Tankograd during the war. About 4,000 were produced from 1943 to 1945. These were expensive machines. Each cost around 250,000 rubles, about $50,000 in 1940s dollars. But their ability to counter German heavy tanks made them worth every penny. The Soviets' ability to produce heavy artillery like this, even under wartime strain, was a game changer. T-60, indestructible locust and bedbug. The T-60 was a tiny light tank, but don't let its size fool you. The Germans called it the indestructible locust because there were so many of them, over 5,600 built in 1941 to 1942, that they seemed to swarm the battlefield like insects. Another nickname, bedbug, Betwans, captured its small size and annoying ability to bite with its 20mm cannon, which could pierce light armor. My take, the T-60 is the ultimate underdog story. It wasn't designed to take on heavy tanks, but its sheer numbers and versatility made it a nightmare for the Germans. The Locust nickname perfectly captures the feeling of being overwhelmed by these little machines. It's a reminder that sometimes quantity is a quality all its own. Economic context. The T-60 was built at automotive plants like GAZ, using car parts to keep production cheap and fast. Each tank cost about 60,000 rubles, around $12,000 in 1940s dollars, making it one of the most affordable tanks of the war. This let the Soviets churn them out in huge numbers, plugging gaps in their defenses during the desperate early years. Soviet artillery, the thunder of the Red Army. GS-3 Ruchbom. The ZIS 376mm field gun was a masterpiece of simplicity and power. Soviet gunners loved it for its accuracy and reliability. The Germans called it Ratschboom because its shell hit the target before the sound of the shot reached your ears. First the ratch of the explosion, then the boom of the gun. That split-second delay was pure terror for anyone on the receiving end. My take. The ZIS-3 was the unsung hero of Soviet artillery. It wasn't flashy, but it got the job done, and its nickname captures the shock and awe it inspired. The Germans weren't just describing a sound. They were describing the feeling of being outmatched by a weapon that struck faster than you could react. Economic context. The ZIS-3 was produced at factory number 92 in Gorky, with over 48,000 built from 1942 to 1945. Its simple design made it cheap, about 40,000 rubles per gun, around $8,000 in 1940s dollars, and easy to mass produce. This allowed the Soviets to equip entire divisions with these guns, overwhelming German forces with sheer firepower. BM-13 Katyusha, Stalin's organ. The BM-13 Katyusha rocket launcher is one of the most iconic weapons of World War II. Its screaming rockets and devastating barges earned it the German nickname Stalin's organ. The launcher's array of rails looked like organ pipes, and the eerie wail of its rockets sounded like a haunting melody. A single salvo could obliterate an enemy position, leaving nothing but smoke and wreckage. My take, the Katyusha wasn't just a weapon, it was a psychological weapon. That howling sound was enough to make even the toughest soldiers dive for cover. The Stalin's organ nickname is almost poetic, turning a tool of destruction into something mythic. It's no wonder this weapon became a legend, inspiring songs and stories. Economic context. The Katyusha was produced in large numbers, about 10,000 units by 1945 at factories in Moscow, Chelyabinsk, and elsewhere. Its simple design, using truck chassis and basic rockets, kept costs low, around 20,000 rubles per unit, or $4,000 in 1940s dollars. This affordability let the Soviets deploy Katyushas en masse, creating walls of fire that broke German lines. The economic miracle. How the Soviets built their war machine. To understand why Soviet weapons were so effective, we need to look at the economy behind them. When Germany invaded in 1941, the USSR lost key industrial regions, but it didn't collapse. Instead, it pulled off one of the greatest industrial feats in history. Factory relocation. Over 1,500 factories were moved east to places like the Urals and Siberia. For example, the Kharkov tank factory was rebuilt in Chelyabinsk, becoming Tankograd. This kept production going despite German advances. Mass production. The Soviets focused on simple, rugged designs like the T-34, IL-2, and ZIS-3. These were cheaper and faster to build than German equivalents. For instance, a T-34 cost about 135,000 rubles, $27,000 in 1940s dollars, while a German Panther cost nearly twice as much. Workforce heroics. By 1943, women made up 53% of factory workers, with teenagers and elderly filling in. This total mobilization kept factories running 24/7. According to web sources, Soviet industrial output surpassed Germany's by 1943, producing 24,000 tanks that year alone. Lend-Lease aid. The US and UK supplied critical materials, aluminum, fuel, and machine tools via Lend-Lease. This boosted Soviet production, especially for aircraft. For example, the US sent over 400,000 tons of aluminum, enough to build thousands of IL-2s. The Soviet war economy was a miracle of resilience. The Germans bet on a quick victory, underestimating the USSR's ability to regroup and outproduce them. Nicknames like Black Death and Stalin's Organ weren't just about the weapons. They were about a nation that refused to break. The Soviets turned factories into fortresses and their people into an unstoppable force. Wrapping it up, the power behind the nicknames. The nicknames the Germans gave to Soviet weapons, whether Iron Gustav, Can Opener, or Stalin's Organ, tell a story of fear, respect, and awe. These weren't just machines. They were symbols of Soviet power built by a nation fighting for survival. The IL-2, T-60, Katyusha, and others didn't just win battles. They shaped the course of history. Behind every nickname was a human story. The engineers who designed these weapons, the workers who built them, and the soldiers who wielded them. The Soviet Union's ability to produce such fearsome machines, even under unimaginable pressure, is a testament to its spirit and ingenuity.